Joining me now are two cheetah conservation experts from South Africa. Of course, the Project Cheetah in India has been thought a lot about over the years, but finally we had 8 Namibian cheetahs being brought in along with 11 South African cheetahs recently as well. And the entire project there that started from their translocation to Kuno National Park in Madhya Pradesh, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself was present during the translocation as well. But there have been several questions about the project after 2 of the cheetahs have succumbed to their deaths. I have with me Vincent van der Merwe, who is a cheetah from the Cheetah Meta Population, who is a Cheetah Meta Population Manager from the Meta Population Initiative. And we also have Professor Adrian Tordif, who is an Associate Professor and Veterinarian and Wildlife Specialist from the University of Pretoria. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. Want to understand from you, where does the future of the Cheetah project in India lie today? I'm aware that you have met with the Environment Ministry officials as well today. And how did the meeting go?
Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. The meeting proceeded very smoothly. I think we, at a difficult phase of the project where the cheetahs are being released into free-ranging conditions. So we know from our experiences in Africa that this is where we can expect to see many mortalities. The cheetahs are going into an environment that is new to them. They don't know where the competing predators are. They're going to have to find this information out for themselves. They haven't established a communication network to communicate with each other just yet. And of course, Kuno is unfenced. And there is all the eggs have been put into one basket. There's only one reintroduction site at this point in time. So we are a little bit concerned, that all the eggs have been put into one basket. We'd like more reintroduction sites to become available. But we have to say that we're very impressed with what the Indian authorities have done on the ground. The monitoring is excellent. The technology that has been made available to the project is world-class. And of course, we have the full support of the Indian authorities, which is something that we don't always have with reintroductions in Africa. So, yes, I think Dr. Tordif will share his thoughts on the 2 mortalities. But at this point in time, everything is proceeding smoothly.
All right, Dr. Tordif, would you like to tell us what has actually led to the mortality in the 2 cheetahs that have been reported in India? What could be the possible reasons? Because one of the mortalities is being said, Sasha, died because of a renal infection. The second cheetah, Uday, the mortality has not been, the cause of death has not been defined yet.
Yes, so the first cheetah was a cheetah from Namibia. She had spent quite a bit of time in captivity in Namibia prior to being translocated to India. There are quite a few reasons which would take quite a long time to explain as to why a cheetah that had been in captivity for most of her life was chosen. From our side, I mean, we can't speak on behalf of the Namibians. We were more involved on the South African side, but there's all the evidence shows at the moment that she already had a kidney problem prior to the translocation, and that this issue had been missed. She apparently appeared healthier, and I mean, from many situations like this, we do see cheetahs look normal, but when you go beneath the surface and you check, do specific tests to check kidney function, then that may not be normal. And so normally this kind of chronic condition, it's not an infection per se. It's caused by various different non-infectious, almost lifestyle diseases, if you like. And it's something we see very commonly in captive cheetahs. We don't necessarily know what the incidence is in wild cheetahs, but all evidence shows that this was not something that she acquired in India. It's not an infection she picked up. It's not related to the stress of the translocation, because she, of all the cheetahs, she was quite used to humans and in being in close proximity to humans. whereas many of the other cheetahs are really very, very wild, and they would be the ones that would be particularly stressed if they came into close contact with humans and in that sort of transport stress and so on. So
Right.
what I'm trying to say is essentially that this is an unfortunate progression of a disease that she probably also already had in Namibia, and that was just missed because the certain tests that were done didn't pick it up prior to the translocation. In relation to the South African cheetah, Uday, that died more recently, currently we still don't have the full information from a post-mortem that was done. We have discussed the post-mortem results with the veterinarians, the team of veterinarians from India that did the work. I must say that I'm very impressed with the thoroughness in examining all the details of the case. The two veterinarians that drove through to do the post-mortem drove more than 9 hours to get there in time to be able to conduct the post-mortem, and did a very thorough job. We saw all the photographic evidence of all the different organs, and further samples were collected, which are now currently being examined, mainly for the histopathology. That's where we look at the tissues under the microscope, as well as the toxicology tests that are being done. What I can say about the case at this stage, again, there's absolutely no sign of any infectious cause for the problem, and therefore there is really no risk to any of the other animals in the facility. We also can exclude quite a number of possible toxins, but at this stage, it seems likely that he either injured himself, ran into a fence or or some other tree or object probably during a high-speed chase, and he could have injured himself. There was some evidence of possible some brain bleeding, but it's a little bit unusual because there were no other signs of bruising under the skin of the head and so on, no skull fractures or anything that we could see. So at this stage, either a traumatic injury or possible botulism is something we've discussed in the media before. It's a toxin that's acquired from bacteria that are in the environment, in every single environment. It just needs the right sort of conditions for them to ingest the toxin. But again, on the post-mortem, we also found that his stomach was empty, so he would have had to get that through water, and there are not many water sources in his enclosure, and all of those appear to be clean, and there were no other animals that died in this process. So unfortunately, it still remains a little bit of a mystery, and we've got really the best team of veterinarians available to examine the situation around his death. But we still have to wait for the final reports to come in with all the histopathology and toxicology as well before we can really come to some conclusion. But there's a whole team of veterinarians who have examined this, and as I said, there's not really any sign of an infection or that there's any risk that is posed to any of the other cheetahs at the collection. So it's an unusual, very rare event, and unfortunate, but we don't think it threatens the project in any way. So going forward.
All right. So you think that this doesn't threaten the project cheetah conservation that is currently going on, of course, with the help of countries like Namibia and the memorandum of understanding that has been signed with South Africa as well. I want to understand from you, is the space in Kuno National Park enough to accommodate 20 cheetahs? Because in the conservation project, there are other sites also that are being looked at now for the translocation of the cheetahs.
Yes, absolutely. In South Africa, we have reserves that are 3 times smaller than Kuno, and they support 25 cheetahs. Punda Game Reserve, for example, is a third the size of Kuno, and it supports a larger population. It also needs to be kept in mind that when we do reintroductions, initially we experience high levels of mortality. So that initial 20 individuals that were made available to Kuno, that number will come down as we lose individuals. More cheetah are going to be lost. We're very surprised by this very negative reaction from the media to the loss of 2 animals. I mean, these losses are anticipated. This is very normal for cheetah reintroduction attempts. So, some of the critiques that have appeared in the media come from places like Namibia and the Masai Mara, Kenya, where there are typically much lower cheetah densities than what we see in our reserves in South Africa, which are similar from a vegetation perspective to what we see in Kuno. Our reserves can support much higher densities of cheetahs. So this is something that we are not too concerned about. What we are more concerned about is the fact that all the eggs are being put into one basket. We would really like to see more reintroduction sites become available, because we know from our experience in Africa that you have certain reserves where cheetah do well, source reserves, and then you have certain reserves where cheetah do struggle. They are called sink reserves. And, the balance between those two is roughly 50-50. So it would be wise to spread the risk with a greater number of reintroduction sites.
All right. Have you done a risk assessment of what these sites could be? Because one of the sites that's being recommended is in the state of Rajasthan. But are there other sites that you have recceed or you have looked at in around India and that you have proposed to the Ministry of Environment to look into for the Cheetah project?
Yeah. Yes, we have looked at a number of potential reserves. We even have visited recently Kana and Bandhagar, which are tiger reserves, and
Right.
I was saying to Vincent that both of those reserves, if they had been in South Africa, we would have made an attempt to introduce cheetahs into both those reserves by now. But the ministry here is quite reluctant to do that, and there are certain understandable reasons for that. The whole purpose of this entire project was to really use the cheetah as an umbrella species to provide conservation benefits and benefits to people around protected areas that do not currently have tigers in them.
Right.
So the added benefit to tiger reserves would be relatively small if we added cheetahs to those reserves compared to non-tiger reserves, that currently haven't really had one of those key species to attract the funding and the sort of tourism, ecotourism that we think would benefit both the ecosystem in those environments through additional protection, but also the income and so on of the people who surround those areas. So the focus still at this stage is to look at reserves that don't have tigers, and at this stage, Gandhi Sagar is very much on the cards at this stage. It is a good environment. They are busy at this stage putting up a fence to provide additional protection there. But they still will require supplementary prey. When we visited Gandhi Sagar in June last year, it's a park that is very badly damaged by cattle that are overgrazing the area. It needs to be secured, and cattle need to be prevented from moving into the park. That will hopefully be done through fencing. But then, because of the cattle, there are also very few prey in that park, and so supplementing the prey would definitely be something that would need to be done. But there are many areas in India where prey, Indian blackbuck, chinkara, and even spotted deer can be moved in. It's a slightly drier area, so the blackbuck and chinkara would be more suitable for that area and be great prey for cheetah. And then following on that, there are other places like Nauradehi that would also be. We haven't visited that area, but from what we've discussed with many of our colleagues here in India, that would be a great area also for introduction, and then possibly even some places in Gujarat for that initial phase of the project. Ultimately, once we have a sufficiently stable population of cheetahs in India, there is no doubt that we will then move towards introductions into tiger reserves as well. I mean, there's no reason in our mind as to why they existed in those areas before in India, and they will continue to coexist, quite successfully, we think, in tiger reserves, as they do with lions and spotted hyenas and other predators in South Africa. The issue of Mukundra has been discussed, and there's a reluctance to do that. It may have to do with it being in Rajasthan, but the reason we've been given at this stage is also that there is some doubt as to what may have caused the issues with the tigers that they reintroduced there. That was unsuccessful, and quite a number of those animals died. I think there's still some uncertainty around that. I think at this stage we're not too worried about that, but yeah, I mean, we'll have to wait and see what the plan of action is with regards to that.
All right. So, what have been your other suggestions to the ministry here? Because the Cheetah project, of course, is something that India is working on, wants to work on as well. And of course, considering that cheetahs were extinct in the country, a lot of effort has been put into bringing these cheetahs here in the Indian subcontinent, and then, of course, making sure that they survive. But you gentlemen have said that there could be more mortalities of cheetahs in near future, and that would be a normal situation. It happens during such translocations, if I'm right.
Absolutely. We experience a high mortality, when we attempt these reintroductions. Typically in Africa, we lose at least half of the founder population within the first year post-release. So that would equate to the loss of 10 animals within the next year. So yes, I mean, our advice is simply that a founder population of 20 individuals is not sufficient. A greater number of individuals need to be brought across from South Africa, and they need to be made available for reintroduction into other sites. We are convinced that Mukundra Hills is a very good place for cheetah release. And that we're convinced that Mukundra will be a source reserve. As Professor Tordif said, Gandhi Sagar, needs to be fenced and it needs to be stocked with game. It's ecologically degraded at this point in time. So a lot of work still needs to be done on Gandhi Sagar. Once that fence is up and the prey has been augmented, supplemented, then Gandhi Sagar is fantastic for cheetah. And then I think we need to assess more sites. The feeling that we got from government is that they would prefer they're a little bit risk averse with regards to tiger reserves at this point in time. They want to attempt that only once the population has stabilized. So we certainly want to get cheetah into more reserves. And then hopefully, we could look at the tiger reserves in future. And the long-term ambition for this project is we'd love to see 500 cheetahs in 30 reserves in India in 30 years' time.
But I was just going to ask you, my next question was, I'm aware that South Africa is going to send about 100 cheetahs in the next 10 years, right? That's the...
Yes. Now we have, we have a growing population in South Africa. So we have to find homes for between 50 and 70 cheetah every year in South Africa. Within South Africa, the amount of space that becomes available, we can house about 20 of them, which means that we have to find homes for at least 30 to 50 cheetah. And we have every year new homes in other countries. And we have permission from the South African government to relocate 29 cheetahs per year, to export 29 wild cheetahs per year. So we, as Professor Tordif always says, I mean, if we don't find homes for these cheetah, then we have to contracept, we have to either hunt them, or we have to euthanize them, and that would be very sad. So we would really, we're very encouraged by what we see in India. We are very grateful for the government support that we are receiving. We don't receive this level of support from other governments in Africa. So we really want to move. We'd like to move ahead with this project and ensure that we get enough genetic diversity into India and introduce enough animals over time, because we know from the scientific literature that if you want a genetically viable population, you need at least 100 individuals.
Well, that is a great thing to hear, but I'm just still thinking about the reasons that the recent cheetah recently died there. And of course, once we know what are the reasons that is leading to mortality in the cheetahs, we'll be able to save more. But perhaps, as you said, that because of the translocation, there could be more mortalities, which is a worrisome issue. And of course, the government, as well as experts such as yourself, are trying to do each and everything every day to conserve the cheetah population. And recently also we've seen 4 new 4 cubs that have taken birth here on the Indian soil. That is also good, happy news from the Cheetah Conservation Project. But of course, in the long term, and just I'm not talking about just a short-term outlook. In the long term, where do you see the Cheetah project going till, at least in the Indian subcontinent? Do you think we'll be able to have a robust population of the cheetah, just like we have of the tiger today?
Absolutely. I think, we have to start looking at cheetah conservation on a global scale, and not really on these isolated little pockets, in small projects in South Africa, in Namibia, and elsewhere. Currently cheetahs are divided up into sort of 5 subspecies, and I don't think it is really helpful to really focus on each of those subspecies as a individual unit. They differ, the differences, genetic differences, ecological differences between them are so small that they're not really going to make any significant difference. And if we focus on only trying to keep each of them separate and focus on their individual conservation, I think we're pretty much doomed to failure. And this, applies to the Asiatic cheetah in Iran and so on. So we really are looking at this really very much on a global scale, cooperating in cheetah conservation on a global level. And this program that we have at this stage is one of the first of its kind. It is ambitious, I admit that. What I really wanted to emphasize is that a lot of this hasn't been done before. And we certainly have had very few cases. We've done a lot of reintroductions of cheetahs into fenced reserves, controlled environment, or far more controlled than the open systems that we have here in India. So this is a tremendous challenge that we are facing at this stage, but it is something that we are very keen to try and learn from the process. I mean, that's how science works. You can't do science by purely just making predictions. I mean, it's good to have a prediction, but then you have to test that prediction by actually carrying out the experiment. And to us, we don't want to just, we care about every single animal, the welfare of every single animal that comes across to India. But ultimately, if we want to succeed, we cannot carry on doing what we have been doing in the past in Africa. Clearly, none of that has ever worked, other than in Southern Africa, where it's the only population in the world that is of cheetahs that is currently growing. All other populations across Africa, Iran, etc., are all in decline, and you cannot keep doing the same thing but expect a different result. So it is really, really critically important that we take these bold steps. We try things that we've never done before, because otherwise, ultimately, the cheetah is doomed to decline into extinction. So a lot of this process is actually what we call adaptive management. People love to tell us, well, this wasn't in the plan. Of course, it's not in the plan, because we are encountering new issues as we go along, and then we respond to those issues. And a lot of the other part that I really want to state here is that it is very rare that you get both the political will, the financial support, and everything like that to be able to do a project on this scale. It's very often that you have to fight for the funding, you have to fight for the political support, and so on. And when you get these things, sometimes you just take a leap forward, even when you're not completely ready. Everything is not 100% prepared. But that is an idealistic view that is never going to be realized. When we are far more pragmatic in our approach, when we get the opportunity, we take a step forward. That certainly doesn't mean that we don't have good science to back us up. But ultimately, this in itself is an experiment that we are desperately hoping will succeed, because it will have dramatic impact on the conservation, not only of the cheetah, but possibly for other species as well.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Professor Adrian, as well as Vincent, for joining me to discuss the Cheetah project and its conservation. And thank you so much as experts, as you have also been working day in and day out conserving the cheetah population and working with India on this particular project. And I'd like to thank you for giving me your precious time there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.